Hello and welcome back to the newest episode of On the Grass with myself, Amy Russell, alongside fellow footy journo Archie Brown and Ella Barber. And we're delighted today to be joined by Michael Johnson, Talent ID Officer at England. Is that right?
It is right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here first and foremost. But yes, that is my role in Talent ID working for the FA.
Perfect. How are you doing? What have you been up to recently?
It's been a busy period for us. We had our 15s and 16s in over Christmas. So we had both age groups in. The first UEFA development tournament for our under 15s. And then we had a double header against Netherlands with the 16s. And then in January this month, we had a Category 2, Category 3 Talent ID event where we've seen best part of 100 players. And obviously our Talent ID department was all across the camp. We identified players and hopefully one or two might make a surprise from the lower leagues potentially coming in to represent England.
Nice. And just before we kind of get into it, just to warm you up, we've got a quick icebreaker. So you've got 30 seconds, no overthinking about it. The question is, you've just walked into a new group of players.
Yes.
What are you trying to establish in that first 30 seconds? Okay.
First,
don't think about it. We'll get the timer up and then we'll go. No overthinking of it. Okay, so Alex, when you're ready with the timer. Perfect. 3, 2, 1, go.
I think the most important thing is to first of all introduce myself and find out a little bit more about the players. Would be then to try and identify the best way forward. So how we're going to play. Trying to get as much information out of the group as to what went wrong. If I'm a new incoming manager, there must be something, so can I unearth something and give them confidence, give them belief, and I think that's one of the major things, and to make sure that everybody's voice
that's time
is heard.
Brilliant.
So now we just wanted to talk to you a bit about your role as Talent ID lead and the scouting process with England. So
yeah,
firstly, how's your role, what does that involve?
It's an interesting one because I've only been in it probably the best part of 18 months now. So when I first went to the FA, that was 2019, and I was an under-21s assistant coach to Lee Carsley. And then I coached up and down through the pathway. And in the last 18 months, there was an opportunity because there was a position that wasn't quite filled, and it was working in that YDP, the youth development phase. So at England, it was that 13s to 16s, trying to lead on making sure that we not only select the best 13 to 16s, but also retain them. Because there's lots of players now can play for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nations based on not only where they're born, but where their parents and grandparents are from. And so it was not only just making sure that we invite the best players with best huge potential to come through, but also making sure we retain them. So that's my role, which is going up and down the country. Obviously, it's not just me. I have a really good support team. Gentleman by the name of John Bayliss, who's come in, who's done some terrific work alongside me. Gary Brazil, who used to be at Nottingham Forest, Chris Bratz. There's a really good team in place to really drive and make sure that we cover the best potential talent at the YDP, but also going further up the age groups.
Looking further up the age groups, how do the England staff decide who scouts where ahead of the World Cup?
So we've got a range of intel. So obviously being the FA, there's lots of intel which is shared between FA coaches that have come from licenses. There's some strong connections. So I might have played with a player who's now working in, I don't know, Man City or Arsenal, and I can pick the phone up and get intel off that. We also have talent reporters and coaches that go out to view games every Saturday, every midweek. So after this, I'm on the way down to West Ham in London to watch a game. And so we're all travelling to make sure we get eyes on players, and then we build up a body of reports. And upon the quality of those reports will be the decision to then bring a player in. That player deserves to come in because the last four reports have flagged this player up that he's been excellent, deserves the opportunity. There are challenges with that because there's only 23 players that can potentially come into a squad, and there's 92 football league clubs, and so some of the football league clubs are, why ain't player X in? It's difficult, but you have to try and give the belief to that player that if they keep playing well, and if they keep playing well, eventually they get an opportunity to come in.
So you've been with the England setup this week. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we had a tournament. Well, not a tournament. It was like a Cat 2 and Cat 3 event down at the St George's Park there. So we asked each club to nominate 2 players, and the players came in over 2 days over the weekend, and then from that our talent reporters were able to then siphon through and go, these ones are the ones with the highest potential. And so there was some terrific talent, and then straight on the back of that we had an event down in Birmingham where the whole of the England set up, Thomas Tuchel, John McDermott, Thomas's staff, all the England FA coaches were down in Birmingham. I actually received an award that night, and it was for the England connection. And so we're all trying to do a connection piece in terms of trying to get players, particularly those younger players, to say, I want to play for England as opposed to, nation X, Y, Z. And this is going off all the way through the pathway. Even a senior player coming into England for the very first time, they've got opportunities to potentially play for other nations. And so I was delighted when our technical director, John McDermott, called me off stage to represent our talent identification department and gave me an award for England Connector of the Year. So I am the proud recipient of that award.
Brilliant, well done.
Thank you very much.
What do England scouts and Thomas Tuchel look for qualities they look for in a player, like heading into World Cup? How do you select?
It's really difficult. At the top end, it's a little bit different. So Thomas, will be selecting from such a vast amount of players what are playing Champions League, Premier League. These players are season winners, and probably the core of that will pick itself. So you look at the likes of Bellingham, Kane. These are really decorated players that would probably be in most squads. I think the support around that is interesting in terms of the ones that are maybe on the periphery and potentially just about to come in. For me at YDP, at the youth development phase, it's completely different. Some of them are maybe late developers, so you might get the smallest one, but actually is somebody that's quite tall in the group. And then how do you monitor and make sure the smaller one is getting equal the opportunity as somebody that's a little bit bigger than him? And so there's a wide range of things that we look for in terms of when a player's coming in. Obviously the technical ability is really, really important. How does that person move? How does that person react? How does that person deal with failures and stuff? And it's more about the intent, because at the younger ages they might not have the strength yet to hit a ball, or they might not have the power in their legs to go past a certain player. But that intent that player tried to show is definitely something where you're looking at. There's something about this player that in a year's time, when he's a little bit stronger, a little bit quicker, a little bit more robust, he'll be able to hit that pass, or he'll be able to get away from that player. So it's making sure that we recognise all these traits when we're looking at players in the YDP.
Does a player's character and personality come into your thinking when you select a squad? Do you do your background research on that as well?
Huge part of it. It's something that we are constantly talking about, particularly with England, because you're going away for tournament football. It's a little bit different in clubs. Where tournament football, you go to a World Cup or you go to a FIFA under-17s World Cup. Lee Carsley's recently won the Euros with the 21s, and so you're probably away for 10 days minimum. Could be anything up to a month if you're successful. So that's when the character and the personality of your squad is so important, because player X might not be the player that plays in any of the games. And so if you get the wrong individual within the squad, how does that land if that person is, quite offish with not only the team but the staff when they're not selected? And so the character and the personality, to be around in and around other players from other backgrounds is really, really important to make sure that you have a really good campaign, not only on the pitch but also off the pitch. And so the personality and the character of the player is definitely referenced. Again, a little bit different at the YDP, because the kids And so, as we all know, when we were 14, 15, there might have been 1 or 2 challenges with that. Not saying that any of you had that, but there might have been 1 or 2 challenges. But as they start to go through the age groups, you would like to think that there's certain behaviours with what we do at England and the clubs would be ironed out by the time they get to that under 21s with Lee Carsley.
How would you say scouting for international football compares to club football?
Again, it's different. I think when it's a club, they're probably bringing in a player to impact here and now. So you look at the transfer window at this moment in time, a lot of clubs are moving for players because there's something missing. With us, we're out there just looking for talent, and that talent may not be ready at this moment in time, but it may be ready in 3-4 years. There's something that we've seen that makes the talent reporters go, there's something about that player there that we need to make sure that he's in our system at some point. And so club football is more about the here and now. Yes, you do, but yes, clubs do potentially look at some players, maybe 18 and 19, I think that's a long-term development, but more often than not, it's about the here and now, whereas international football, I think is completely different in terms of how you talent ID a player.
In terms of your role in England, what would you say that kind of the standards that you would set in your role for a player, what would that be for you?
Well, it's myself, and it's not just myself. There's a wider team. So we have a head of coaching what's come in called Callum Moonarak, who used to be at West Ham. He's really important. And then I work with 2 of the age group coaches, a gentleman by the name of Matt Thorpe, who does the under-15s, and then the under-16s is a gentleman by the name of Barry Lutus. So between the 2 coaches, the head of coaching, and myself as head of talent ID development, we try and put a framework, a behavioural framework around the camps that our 15 and 16s go that will attend these camps. And I think it's really important that we talk about the things away from the pitch, because these are young players finding themselves jostling for what would I want to say, the main person within that camp. There's a lot of young players that believe they may be the best player at the club, but when you come into England now, you may not be the best player at England. And so how they are treated in their clubs may look a little bit more different when they come into England, and how they may feel because of all of a sudden it's competitive, it's competition now. I've been dropped for the first time. So all these things that some of these young players are dealing with is so interesting to understand the makeup of these players. And as they go through the pathway, obviously that a lot of these issues will be ironed out. Obviously they'll get more confident as they get more older, but it's such an interesting mix when you see these players come in at such a young age.
In terms of character as well, I know you mentioned it's so important to have such a character at that age, but how easy or how difficult is it for you to look at a player and say, okay, it's different now, we're at England, now you're not at your club and you're getting as much game time? How important is it to just sit down with that player and say, look, it's a little bit of a different setup here?
Yeah, it's again, it's a challenge between myself, Callum, and the head coach, because it is different, and tournament football is different. So, if you've got players, a 23, 24-man squad, how do you make sure that everybody gets certain amount of minutes, certain amount of time on the field? And so where a player might be at his club, you're probably not going to get a turnaround in a tournament of so many games, but that player's used to playing every game because the club wants him to play every game. Whereas you come into England, you might play game A, but the manager might choose, I want to see that person in game B, and all of a sudden, I'm not playing in game B. And then for the first time, that player might be a sub. And it's probably some of these players first time that they may have been benched, because at club and at Grassroots they probably would have been the best player. And so dealing with all that brings, and it's a positive for the clubs, because these players will go on to have careers, but will go on to one day sit on the bench and handle that now as opposed to that coming later. And it's an interesting one when you see so many people, so much diverse. And I don't mean just diverse. I mean diverse in terms of players coming from north, south, east, west, because usually the Southern League play down south, the North play down north. You get a different kind of football when you go up north to down south, and so when they all come in, it's so interesting when it's like a melting pot of cultures and people from different backgrounds. It's really, really interesting.
In terms of the amount of talent in the England setup, I know you've been involved, you said, for about 7 years, is that right? So has there been any players, I know it would have changed over the years, that you first looked at and thought, I can see them making it into a success story, and they have been successful? Is there any players that spring to mind in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first came in here, the very first player that I would have worked with would have been Phil Foden. And then you look at a Mark Gui now, who's just moved to Man City himself, Curtis Jones. So you see something about these players, and it's so good for me to have that eye, because when you're now looking at players, because you've got that parameter in terms of, well, that's what Curtis was doing, or that's what Phil was doing off the field. You kind of got an eye that when you see somebody doing it and you capture it, you kind of go, I remember that 6-7 years ago, or do you know what, that's what good looks like, because I seen good 6-7 years ago, and now that good is a serial campaigner in the Premier League, winning Champions Leagues. You Jude's at Real Madrid. These guys are season campaigners in the England squads. So you've got a really good eye in terms of looking what they were doing when they were young, and now they've gone through the age groups and now they're in the seniors.
As well, just talking lastly about your experience with Guyana as well, I just wanted to ask a little bit about how you found that and how you adjusted to that. How was your experience with Guyana?
It was an amazing experience. I remember I was at Derby at the time working as an ambassador for Mel Morris, and the opportunity came to go to Guyana, and I spoke with Roy McFarland about it. It was like, go and do it. And this was a club this was a country that had never been anywhere in the FIFA rankings, never qualified for a major competition, and we did a lot of work in terms of players with a Guyanese background that were playing across the leagues in MLS, in Canada, in Europe, obviously England, and we started to get some really good names to come and bolster what was already a decent outfit, but it lacked confidence because it never had achieved anything. And so when we qualified for the very first time through the Gold Cup, it was such a surreal feeling to stand there playing against America with so many thousands of Guyanese, proud Guyanese, coming to a major tournament for the first time. And it definitely changed the landscape of football in Guyana. There's more money now gone into facilities. Women's football's on the rise. There's more coaches which have come in. Grassroots football's took a lift. Investment into football. So it was really, really a good positive thing that we achieved with Guyana.
Definitely. You mentioned Grassroots as well. I mean, I wanted to ask, because I know a lot of people watching will be Grassroots coaches, Grassroots players, and obviously that's what we're talking about on this podcast quite a lot. I wanted to see what advice that you would give to coaches at a grassroots level that maybe you've taken working on the international stage. What would you say to grassroots coaches?
I think the first and foremost is that definitely be you. What do I mean by that? So there's so much material now online. You could definitely be somebody that cuts and paste and I'm going to do this. I've seen Pep, or I've seen how Michael's done it. I'm not saying you don't take, but you put your own spin on it. I see too many coaches now. They're literally copying and pasting a Pep training drill and then going to deliver it, and you kind of go, I've seen that how many times? Oh, that's the one from there. So definitely be you. And then most importantly, how do you get opportunities to go and watch good coaches at work? I think it's such a undervalued commodity in terms of, who do you know, or who potentially knows somebody that you could go and see how they work, what they work, the kind of words they say, the kind of conversations you have with players, the kind of training drills you might look and go, I could do something close to that, and then maybe yourself have a Q&A with the coach afterwards. So I'd say definitely be you, and also if you can, try to get some time with a coach or a coach that's working in a position that you admire, or you admire this certain coach, and just get a little bit of time and watch them, and then have a Q&A, have a few questions with them, and just continue learning.
Yeah, that's great.
You obviously had a great career as a player. At what point of that journey did you realise that coaching was the right next step for you?
Definitely when I went to Notts County. So I played at Derby County till I was 34, yeah. And then I went on loan to Sheffield Wednesday, and the penny still did drop. And then when I left Sheffield Wednesday, I went to Notts County as the club that I first started off. That's the club that I went back home to finish my career with. And it was Sven-Göran Eriksson that came, God bless his soul, who was a former England manager, and he mentioned at the time that seeing the kind of attributes that I had, because I'd always been fortunate that I was captain somewhere in my clubs, and he said, why don't you look to do some coaching? And so I got involved with coaching, went on my licenses, and then a role came up at Notts County, the under 18s, and that was my first foray into coaching. So I took the Notts County under 18. So I was at Notts County at the end of my career, probably 33, 34 years old.
So you mentioned Sven-Göran Eriksson there. Do you think him and any other managers you played under have influenced your coaching style now?
Yeah, I think they've all influenced in certain ways. I've had some really good characters, the likes of your Barry Fries. Neil Warnock was probably one of my favourites. Some of the lessons that I've learned from Neil have stood me through the test of time. And then you go Birmingham again, Barry Fries, Steve Bruce, Trevor Francis, God bless his soul, Brian Laws. But I could go on. Rennie Samois at Jamaica, but I think the one that really stood out for me was Neil. It's sometimes it's about, probably less so for me, the technical and tactical. I'm very big on culture, environment, behaviours and values. I think that is such a underplayed card when it comes to setting in a right environment for you to thrive. And that's not just sport, by the way. That goes across any kind of environment you walk in. If you've got the right environment, you've got the right culture, you've got the right behaviours, you've got the people with the right values, then you've got a good chance of succeeding in whatever field that you put your hand to. And Neil was definitely that. Very, very firm. But there's no coincidence that Neil Warnock is the record. He's got the record amount of promotions from the Championship to the Premier League. No other manager's got more. What I would say is that when you get to the Premier League, because of the quality of the Premier League, you probably need a bit more in terms of your quality in your squad. But Neil, definitely right up there.
What would you say are the biggest differences between being a player and a coach?
A player, you're told what to do. A coach, you're telling the player what to do. So it's. I know I say that, but it's definitely. As a player, I loved my playing career. I was very fortunate to have a lot of success with the teams that I played with. It was so good in terms of being captain with some of those teams and having an insight into some of the discussions from coaches. But definitely being a coach, it's difficult watch at times because you're watching and you're kicking the ball. You're not now on the pitch. You're removed from the pitch. And so you know what to do, but you're not on there to affect it. But what I love about coaching and management is having the opportunity to change not only the lives of the people on the pitch. It's the families that also attached to that, and then I think more importantly, it's the city attached to that. And with me, when I went to Guyana, it was a country, and so the effect that you had on a player, the ripple effect going to a nation now, it's something that will live with me forever. So do I miss playing? Yes and no, but I definitely value coaching and management for sure.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge in making that step into coaching? Is there any particularly difficult situations you've dealt with?
I think there's no getting away from the lack of diversity in terms of managers of colour. We look across the game of football now, and there's, I think there's less than 7 or 8%. Probably, even worse than that. I think the last time I really looked at the numbers was less than 4%. You see the likes of Liam Rosenior, who's gone in at Chelsea, and I hope he does really well. Obviously, a good friend of mine, Darren Moore, has recently lost his job. But then after Liam Rosinha and probably Nuno Espirito, you're kind of like, okay, where am I going next? And it's hard to believe in such modern day Great Britain, with the amount of players from a diverse background playing football. Like, where are all these players of colour going after their careers finished? Because I don't see that representation in coaching, let alone management.
Do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, Darren Moore, we spoke about it the first time we actually had him on the podcast. He was talking about the lack of diversity in the game.
Yeah.
I know you said about Darren Moore, we were talking beforehand, your relationship with him. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're really good friends. You know, I'd say he's probably one of my best friends to come out of football. And you know, you play with that many teams throughout your career and that many squads that you are involved with every year, season out. And it's interesting when you come out and you retire. I started at 17, and then 20 years later, all those change rooms. And then, you know, you still have the friendship of a Darren Moore, there's a Paul Devlin, there's players that you leave the game actually, and you still have this connection with way into not only your coaching, your management, but your family and your friendship life. And Darren's definitely one of those. We speak very, very regular. Probably not so regular in the last year because he's been busy. But, you know, if I don't catch up with him at least once, twice a month, then I know there's something wrong.
I mean, the last time we had him on was obviously quite recently as well. He said a few things about teams, you know, fighting for promotion and teams fighting relegation, and it got quite a little bit of a controversial stir across social media. So we're going to take a little look at that right now and play it for you.
And there's certain teams that you're expected to win home and away. You're expected to. So that carries a different pressure, but also it carries a different pressure week in, week out at the football club, and an expectancy level, but also dealing with a group of players that can handle that expectancy level. Then you might switch it to where I've been at Port Vale, where it's all about survival and staying in the division. So there's a different expectancy that you have to manage the group of players in a sense that you still have to keep them firing, but also the mindset and the level of around it is just about survival. So it's a different entity, because there's certain things that you're thinking that there's certain games that you have to make sure that you're doing well in and gain points in, and there's certain games where there may be just teams in the division that are stronger than you at the end of the day, and however well you play, if they play to the capabilities, then they'll win. So I've had the both aspects of Sheffield Wednesday and if you're looking at Port Vale at the same level, and the expectancy, and it's totally different. But the same determination still lies within you to drive the organisation to reach the levels and standard that you need them to be at to achieve both goals.
Okay, Michael, obviously you've seen the clip on social media. What are your thoughts to what Darren said, and what do you think about the controversial kind of backlash from fans online?
I can understand what Darren's trying to say, and I can understand how some fans might perceive it. But Darren's not talking about the club. He's talking about the situation. So if I came out of Port Vale, so when I was at Derby County, we got promoted to the Premier League. We all knew it was going to be difficult. The challenges of being in the Championship and going for gold is realistic with Derby. We're at the top end. We've got a great chance of getting promotion. City's behind us. We get promoted. Now, all of a sudden, we come out of that pool. We're going to a bigger pool. Your Arsenals, your Liverpools, obviously Port Vale would have gone into League One with some big fish in that sea. The reality of us at Derby was that we were always going to struggle. What we wanted to do was trying to survive and be in that top 4, top 5 to eventually give us an opportunity to go again that second season. We didn't quite get it. And that's what Darren's trying to say. It's no disrespect to Port Vale, and I understand he said Sheffield Wednesday, but I think what he was trying to say was Sheffield Wednesday was striving for the top, whereas Port Vale did absolutely fantastic to get out of League Two. Now you go into League One, you're an underdog. So the fight process, the mentality of the players who are fighting now to make sure we stabilise our league position is completely different to those that are at the top end of League One, the top end of the Championship, who probably won't fight as much but it's a different mentality that you need to bring. And unfortunately, he lost his job. I think it might have been a little bit early. I would have liked to have seen them given a bit longer, but I definitely understand what he was trying to say. It's two different mentalities. One is going, after a great season, is going to try and stay up. The other is actually trying to go for promotion. So if you take away the club itself, it's the situation that you're really looking at and analysing.
Yeah, I mean, do you think as well, playing for a point, if you're a club that's struggling against a team who's looking for promotion, do you think playing for a point is a good thing, or is that something that's looked upon quite negatively? I
think you've got to take what you can.
Yeah.
I think obviously you always go there to win. If you can nick a win, it's great. But the harsh reality is that if you go and open yourself against some of these bigger clubs, you're going to get hurt. And so the likelihood is that you will take a point, but if you get an opportunity to take 3, of course you're going to take it. And so the mindset in how you prepare your players and how you go into the game, a manager's got to look at the reality of the situation. Obviously, a lot of fans are dealing with the hope, and their club's the best. But the reality of the situation is when you look at those bigger clubs against the smaller clubs, particularly a club that has just come up, they're looking at you as going, right, we should get 3 points. You're looking at them as, particularly when you're going to them and going, if we can nick a win, a point would be a good, keeps the momentum going, keeps that unbeaten, or gets you back on that track. And if you could nick a win, it's even better. So there's different ways and different styles how you prepare and mentally try and get your team to believe. It's all about belief. And if you can get that winning sequence or that unbeaten sequence going, then you're in a fantastic place.
Definitely.
I just wanted to kind of touch on your ambassador and community work.
I loved it.
So obviously you've been on various diversity panels,
yep.
So such as the FA's inclusion advisory one. Can you just kind of touch a bit on what your role was within that, what you had to do, what kind of things that?
When I joined FA Inclusion Advisory Board, it was around trying to bring and unite the game. So it was different aspects of diversity. Mine was around obviously trying to ensure that more people from different backgrounds were getting opportunities into coaching and management. But it was a real eye-opener in terms of the governance of the game and how the game works behind the scenes. I've always been a footballer or a coach, and you're pretty much front-facing, but then to remove yourself back and see how things are done, particularly at the FA, from a diversity point of view, and all the legislation and all the governance and all the work and people doing grassroots stuff. It was fantastic to see how the game unites right across England to ensure that we are as diverse as possible in terms of that front-facing aspect, and also making sure that the barriers to football are equal as well.
Do you think we've kind of done well to kind of make a level playing field, or do you think there's still kind of more that needs to be
There's still more to go, without shadow of doubt. And diverse in terms of all aspects of diversity, not just for people of colour. I think this is a great sport, a great game that we have. It's our national treasure, and we're not quite there yet. You just look across both the male and female game. Obviously, the people of colour being able to manage, coach, work in the game. I think there's so much to be done. But there's some terrific work going in the background, that's what I would say, but we're nowhere near yet, not at all.
If you could kind of say one thing that you think needs to be focused on first, what would you kind of think the starting point is?
I definitely think in terms of management, because it's... So, I love being on this sofa here with you guys, and the thing why I say that is because there's many people from different backgrounds will be in universities and colleges. There's many players that have aspired to go and be players, and it may not have worked. So if you love the game, but then you're looking up and going, okay, how do I get into a Derby County? How do I access a media role? And you don't see people like you being able to be at that top place, and you're not good enough to play, but you love the game. How do we encourage you guys to really go, I'm going to make a real determined effort to be the best media person that I can? And this is what I'm saying for clubs. You've got such an opportunity whether it's Derby, whether it's up in Manchester, to elevate your club by people from all backgrounds being at the senior level. That would encourage those universities to say, look, I know that I can get a chance to go in at Derby because the CEO is this, the academy director is that, the board member here is this. But if you don't see that, and it's just, you know, all the same, no matter what, whether that's 10 people that look like me, 10 people that look like you, then how as a Mel are you going to aspire? Because there's nobody that looks like you.
Yeah, definitely.
And so with the clubs, I honestly believe the challenge for the club is to make, particularly now in 2026, is to make your clubs, and it's not a give me, it's to get the best people in roles which would then inspire the next generation to go and believe and achieve. You don't need to be the best one on the pitch. If you're not good enough to be on the pitch, you could be that person up there. But if you don't see it, how do you aspire to become that person? And that's why one of my questions I asked when I first come in was, what is the hopes and dreams of you guys?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's a good question. You want to work our way around the...
Yeah, anything talking or writing about football, really. I think writing's probably my strong point, but yeah.
And who do you see that you aspire to be?
There is more and more women in the industry coming through, I think, but yeah, there's still very male-dominated spaces. Like when you go to press boxes to report on games, it's still very, very male-dominated.
Okay, interesting.
I'd like to work on the more like the TV punditry side, so I think Alex Scott is a great person to see on your screen, especially with Match of the Day at the moment. You've got Gabby Logan and Kelly Cates all working on there, so it's brilliant to see. Yeah, definitely. What about you?
Same for me, really. Yeah, the punditry and the commentary side of things. I think someone like Darren Fletcher's a really good voice. Peter Drury, someone like that. Yeah, I've been watching and listening to for a long time. So yes, definitely something where I can talk and be on camera would be.
But it's amazing that you've all got role models because you've had opportunity to see these people in work. Had you not seen a Fletch, had you not seen an Alex Scott, and blah, it's difficult to then see, well, how do I get there? And obviously you'll probably all be following those footsteps and how they got there. So it's really, really interesting that.
Definitely.
And we're just going to go on to some questions. We've got some questions from Grassroots coaches. Ella's going to ask them to you.
So, Lee Stone has asked, at under 18 level, what are the hardest qualities to project forward into senior football, and how do you avoid overvaluing early physical development?
That's a really good point. So we constantly have these discussions around big and early, because the eye sometimes would lean to this person's good, but the only reason he's good is because he's 6'1", he's the biggest person, he's the quickest person, he's the strongest person, and then the little dot doesn't get a look in, but actually technically he's better. But the disparity at this age group is such a big thing. So it's really, really encouraged. We speak about seeing the unseen. So what is the game intelligence like? What is the football IQ like? What are the receiving skills? What does this player do off, it would be off the ball? So are there attributes where you're seeing this player scanning whilst the player's over there? Is he encouraging? And of course there has to be a level of technical ability, but the same how you wouldn't discount somebody that's 6'2" and under 15. It's the same way you don't discount the 5'1" under 16. It's still the same, but you've got to be aware of those traits which just rely on the dominance of the physicality and power of a player.
Lee's also asked, how does the England pathway balance club identity with international playing principles when identifying and developing talent?
It's a really good question. Obviously we all the clubs are doing different things. There's certain clubs that will have principles where they may not build from the back. It may be they play a 3-5-2, whereas England we might play a 4-3-3, and so it's really difficult in terms of trying to marry up what England do to a club. We have our own identity. We encourage players to be brave, to receive the ball in pockets and tight areas, and it's those kind of attributes that we, fearless is another one. When you get on the ball, what can you do, and don't be frightened. It's that kind of core components that we ask for, it's different again because it's very individual. Whereas clubs, they will be very fixed in terms of the style of play that players will play. So it's more of when we go in talent ID, it's the individual we're looking at. Then you bring him in, and then you try in a space of 10 days to put them in a style that allows these players to be the best that they can be.
And then Will Meredith has asked, what is your favourite aspect of coaching and mentoring players at Campione Soccer Academy?
Campione is a wonderful thing that I've been involved with. I've probably been involved in Campione for 15 years now. I don't know if you remember, there was a player at Crystal Palace and Birmingham City, England, player called Andy Johnson. And so back in 2015, somewhere around there, 2010, we decided to set up an holiday company called Campione. There's a lady what was with us there who runs it, called Hayley. At this moment in time, it's myself and Andy Cole now who are at the helm, and it's a great vehicle for kids. It's not so much around kids in academies, it's around coming to a destination in Europe, or it's been worldwide. Malaysia was last year, and you can bring your families there. The parents can go on and get some serious sunshine, while the kids, can train 2 hours a day, top up the skills, great fun, with some real good personalities. Last year we had Harry Redknapp, which was unbelievable, a really funny character. So we try and make sure we get different personalities each year to come and entertain the kids, and obviously I'll be one of the head coaches.
We was also asked, during your time as an assistant coach with England U18s alongside Paul Williams, which player left a lasting impression on you and why?
God dear, that's an interesting one. There's quite a few that I've gone through. You look at Nico Williams now, which is playing at the top end of the game. There's a lad that he's at Leicester. He's still somebody that I admire, a guy called Sammy Braybrook, who has gone out on loan to get more minutes. But there's some honestly, there's some real fantastic talent that when you look at what they've done in terms of going through the path when it's so difficult, some will go all the way through. Some will just come in at a certain age, then you don't see them for 2 years, then they come back at the under-21s. And so it's interesting. Lewis Miley would be another one that has gone through, is now at Newcastle. And so there's some really good talent that England are producing through. And it's down to the academies. Obviously the Cat 1s, the Premier League have done a terrific job. For you to get your category status, you need to have a certain amount of coaches, pro-licensed coaches, investment into pitches, and a programme as well that encompasses all the different age groups. And so if you don't meet that, you don't get your category 1 status. And the Premier League also help fund that. So the initiative from the Premier League to improve the state of England football with the category 1s is probably why England has sat here with so much talent now down the pathway, because over the last 15-20 years the investment from the Premier League into Cat 1s now and Cat 2s and Cat 3s is now starting to bear fruit with what you see in terms of players who technically can handle the ball, similar to what the Spanish, the Portuguese, whereas historically it was more, England's game was about power and up and at 'em. Now we're still up and at 'em, but you've got a little bit more in terms of the technical approach from these players. And so I think the game itself, can't leave the PFA out of that as well, they have their role to play in this, but the game itself has definitely supported the opportunity for these players to be better than probably what we've ever had.
Finally, from Chloe Hunter, from the social corner of the 4-corner model, what key attributes do you look for when identifying talent at under 18 level?
I think definitely there's got to be an enjoyment of the game. And I love to see young players not only enjoy the game but play with a smile on their face. It's less about throwing your hands up in the air if it's not gone, a pass has gone off, or your reaction to a mistake, because we all make mistakes, and whilst you're throwing your hands up in the air, the game's still going, your team's one player down. And so the social corner is more around your enjoyment of the game. You can see whether players play with enjoyment, that freedom of what it brings, but also those things that you probably don't see when you're on TV because it's following the ball. So what is that player doing whilst the ball overs are there? Is he encouraging? Is he organising? Is that player who's just hit a bad pass, is he straight away, he's missed it, he's going to go back and get that ball? Or actually, is he upset with himself? How do you take on failure and how do you take on success? You know, all of a sudden you've just put one in the top corner. What's your next 5 minutes like? Do you think you've arrived or actually you're at it again? So those are the things that from a social aspect that I would look for in terms of when I'm out there scouting for players.
And then finally, just before we finish, I've got one last question. If you could give one piece of advice to any grassroots coach, what would that be?
I would say not only go for your dreams, but dream the impossible. I would never have said that I would have... I was never good enough to play for England. Let me just state that now. And I played for Jamaica, which was a good level. So for me, working at England, not only the England story, the Guyana story, I would never have said I would have taken a nation to a major competition. And so the ability to dream, but not only dream, really believe in it, really go for it, I think is a gift to each and every coach, because that's in your own mindset, your own mentality. You either tell yourself you can't, or you allow others to tell yourself you can't. So if you freeze saying that you're going to be media specialist, what is stopping you? There's absolutely nothing. Even if it gets tough, you still got the opportunity to really believe that you can achieve. And so for myself, it was always a stage in my life where I just thought there's nobody telling me that I cannot. It just can't happen. So I would definitely leave with that one.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today as well. It's been great to have you here.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you all on the BBC Grandstand or Question of Sport soon.
And thank you to everybody for watching and listening to the latest episode of On the Grass, the football coaching podcast from the Derbyshire FA and us here at Derby Uni Footy Journos. Thank you to everyone behind the camera and the production crew. Make sure to drop us a follow on Instagram and we'll see you again soon for the latest episode. Thank you.